Good morning. Hello. I'm just juggling a few things. Hang on. I'm just trying to, just give me 1 second. I was going to show a video and then it decided to start working. So navigating my bookmarks. Where's, oh, wrong account. Fuck. How, oh my God. I hate having to navigate all these different accounts. I've switched my Twitter account over to try and get a fresh start and retrain because I just had too much junk in there. I don't know what's going on with my account. I thought, let's just have a fresh start. But then I was supposed to quit and I was supposed to have enough. And now I've ended up juggling 2 different accounts. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's so much hassle. So anyway, just give me 1 second. Okay, just 1 sec. So bookmarks. Just let me go to this thing because I want to show you. I just want to open with the state of tech regulation today. Okay. This is the state that we are in. No, not hitting bookmark. We are copying the link, opening the link, because X just can't just decide to work on its own without dramas. Just give me 1 sec.
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my
nation in
asked-
Singapore.
No,
I did not.
Do you have a Singaporean passport?
Yes, and I served my military for two and a half years in
Do you
Singapore.
have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Your wife is an American citizen. Your children are American citizens.
That's correct.
Have you ever applied for American citizenship?
No,
Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my nation
I'm
in
asking-
Singapore. No, I did not.
Do you have a Singaporean passport?
Yes, and I served my military for two and a half years in
Do you
Singapore.
have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Your wife is an American citizen. Your children are American citizens.
That's correct.
Have you ever applied for American citizenship?
No, not yet.
Okay. Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No,
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm
Okay.
Singaporean.
Let me ask you some hopefully simple questions. You said earlier, in response to a question, that what happened at Tiananmen Square in June of 1989 was a massive protest. Did anything else happen in Tiananmen Square?
Yes, I think it's well documented. There was a massacre.
There was
yeah.
the indiscriminate slaughter of hundreds or thousands of Chinese citizens.
Excuse me, sorry. This is the state of it. This is where we're at, people. Serious issues run by complete and utter farce, complete and utter clown show. But anyway, so what you saw there was the CEO of TikTok, okay, who, yes, TikTok was owned by ByteDance. If you don't know that TikTok, right, the app, was initially started as Musical.ly, okay, which was owned by ByteDance, okay. It then sort of morphed into the product that you see today, which is TikTok, okay. That is a Chinese company. Since then, under pressure, okay, under some pressure, I would argue, a lot of it is to do with the fact that, TikTok does what American tech companies do, but it also won't be bullied sort of into various things. Like we've seen that with the Twitter files, we've seen that with other things, right? Where TikTok is a little more free and easy going than other social media apps, right? Now, of course, they're turning it into this sort of moral panic about the youth and the, how it's like, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so TikTok, initially owned by a Chinese company, okay? TikTok in the US has since been headquartered, broken out away from the Chinese company. They've gone through various hurdles, lots and lots and lots and lots of hurdles to sort of prove that they're not, sharing data with the Chinese government. They've gone through all of this stuff, okay? Then, in a very serious hearing over some quite serious allegations, right? You have this CEO of TikTok questioned, who is from Singapore, lives in America, has no affiliation with the CCP. And you sit there and you just go, what a fucking clown show. What an absolute fucking disgrace. Because I think it is worth mentioning. So there was this, I think it was about 4 hours. I couldn't get through the whole 4 hours. It's, I'm interested in it, but it's still boring and I just haven't had time. I've got to prioritize my time, right? I'm not in the business of reporting on this stuff. So, I know how it's going to go down. There's been so many of these already. And I think something that some people need to remember, okay, when we're talking about these things is that in the US, the power lies ultimately with Congress. Congress can pass legislation at any time, okay? They can, aside from this sort of sideshow of sort of, absolute laughingstock of a hearing, okay? That's mostly theatre because the Congress can actually pass legislation at any time. If this is actually truly bipartisan, you'd be able to pass this pretty easily. So what we saw this was a 4-hour hearing in the Judiciary Committee, boring shit, okay, about, hauling big tech in front of the committee, as they've done pretty much every year since the internet has hit, but particularly with social media, okay. And it's an absolute farce at this point, okay. I think a lot of people watch this stuff. Anyone who's in the know knows that the power lies with these guys to legislate. They don't. They choose not to. And part of the reason that they do that is because, yes, some of the stuff that they say is true, which is that Meta, Amazon, Google, Apple, all sorts of corporations, okay, not just tech corporations, but all of them, okay, have outsized power and influence in in funding lobby groups, okay, and they use, I've heard about this before. Like a lot of people who work sort of in the more volunteer capacity areas of tech, like ICANN or those sorts of conferences and that sort of stuff, right? All the not-for-profit orgs. It's not an uncommon story that Meta will show up with their 10 10 corporate lawyers and just sort of stack out the meeting. Okay. That's a known thing, right? And who wouldn't? That's what trillion-dollar corporations are going to do. That's what multi-hundred-billion-dollar corporations are going to do. And, you know, you may have seen the news where it's like Zuck forced to apologize to the families of people harmed by social media. And again, unfortunately, Taya ends up being the contrarian one, because guess what? I actually sit with Zuck on this, okay? Because that hearing is an absolute farce in terms of due process. They can regulate, legislate, enforce at any time they choose not to. Then what they will do is hold a hearing, which is, you know, obviously has all of the cameras and all of the spectacle. They don't give a fuck about the families affected by Instagram and social media any more than Zuck does, okay? It's all for show. And I think that that's part of the problem, is that people are sort of falling for this prol feed, okay, for an Orwellian term, of distraction and spectacle and theatre, when because they rely on your ignorance. They rely on the fact that you personally feel as though Facebook has, is harmful, Instagram is harmful, which, you know, some of that is true, some of it is not true. You consume media that's constantly engaging in this sort of moral panic about social media. There is no real causal relationship between the use of social media per se, okay, and mental health outcomes. Again, I'm not doing this thing where it's like I'm not acknowledging that there is a problem, okay, but be wary of people that are sort of cherry picking and taking sort of one study or one researcher who has a particular agenda. So like Jonathan Haidt, for example, is a psychologist who does a lot of this research on this, but he also wrote the book, The Coddling of the American Mind. He's that psychologist. He's buddies with the right, and he's a big part of his goal is to present and frame social media as the root cause of all of these mental health issues that are in the youth, right? This is how it links to some of this culture wars, wokeism stuff. You got to understand the pipeline and the steps and the incremental steps that people make into the far right and into this sort of, providing cover for more sinister sorts of politics. Again, whether it's deliberate on his part or not, just being used. You've got to be mindful of the fact that you're going to be used for this stuff, right? And so a lot of the person who's behind a lot of this research is focused. He's sort of working back from his conclusions, which is that social media is the cause and capitalism isn't, right? And again, we're going to have an argument about, what the actual cause is, right? But once you actually look at, I've actually literally, I did a literature review on some of this stuff. So I kind of am across a lot of the research. I don't think that there is anything particularly compelling or different or new that's come out in the last, year that doesn't back me up. But again, bear with me. Let me just have my coffee. Just warming up, as you know. So, what a load of old shit. There you go. Did that audio play? What a load of old shit. Seemed to have. All right. Anyway, hello. So I think that you've got to really separate the theatre, because I did notice that a lot of this stuff with these committees are about getting the clip. And that's the whole game. Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, these people, they're all the same clowns that are just interested in getting their clip for Twitter and cherry picking it, snipping it and going, I'm going to force Mark Zuckerberg to apologize. Now, the fact that they hauled those families in there, okay, in a calculated way to create, in order to orchestrate that scene, they knew what they were doing. They planned to do that. And, the kind of that sort of ambush that happened, that warrants pause. Again, like this is how, this is exactly how people's best intentions, valid causes, valid concerns, trauma, grief, all of those things get weaponized by these cynical political actors to do nothing and to act, and so I think it's very important to keep this laser focus on the fact that these guys could have legislated 10 years, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 years ago. Okay? There's been ample opportunities to legislate. Okay? Across all presidents, all governments. Okay. So first off, you need to understand that Congress, if there was true bipartisan support for these antics, okay, it'd be a law by now. Okay, we've got it here. It's coming into force here. The DSA and EU, it's going into force there. America, for some reason, is not doing that. Why is that? Because it's theatre. Okay, that's what you need to understand. That's why when you're sitting there cheering on this stuff, you're basically doing a reality show, cheering on a reality show. Okay, it's a spectacle. It is not based in fact. Like a lot of the claims that they were making, very emotional claims, they won't hold up in court. I doubt they'll hold up in court. Some will. Like I've said, like if you've been watching my streams for sort of any length of time, you'll know that I've got a lot to say about like tech, a lot of criticisms. There's a lot of things that, you know, need fixing and changing and legislating, and we're going to see a lot of cases. But at the same time, these appeals to people's biases and emotions, that's not law. That's not the, you know, that's not, it's extrajudicial in the way that it approaches things, in the fact that like they still have, where's my words? They still have a responsibility to follow due process, not just sit and make claims that can't be defended by Zuckerberg. And the fact that he pushed back, I think, is a good thing, right? Because I think that he was right in this. And that's the thing, is that you always end up being the unpopular person for saying, hey, here's how it is. These guys are clowns. Wow, great. You got your clip. Well done. You got your clip for Twitter. Cool. Okay. What are you going to do about the mental health problems? What are you going to do? Are you going to actually fund mental health programs? Are you going to, help with young men and young women that are affected by social media? Are you going to adequately fund the research and the programs that are required, which are ultimately, I've talked about this before, ultimately mirrored on things like the community justice system, where you have outreach programs, where you have early intervention, where you fund more resources for mental health care. Okay. Do you actually make it so that you force Facebook and these apps to not use dark patterns and not use AI in order for content moderation? Okay, are you going to then legislate to make it so that content moderation workers aren't just exploited in the global south and underpaid and exposed to a trauma feed 24/7? Are you going to sit and carry on for about for every year that platforms are biased against you and that everyone keeps being banned and that people shouldn't be banned, and then just continually haul people in front of a committee when you put something that is an alternative to a ban, and then you drag them over the coals for that alternative? Like, well, what are your actual solutions here? Okay, it's one thing, and this is the whole thing. The whole thing with this forgive me, I'm a little stuttery today. This whole spectacle around the hearing is why I kind of just switch off, because I know that it's actually just sitting there and just trying to get clips. It's just farming for clips. It's not actually doing anything. It's not actually offering any alternative solutions. I've got a lot of criticisms of the way that Meta do business, a lot of the criticisms around the way that they don't share their research because under the guise of trade secrets, the way that they do unethical psychological experiments, all of those things, they stand. But that doesn't necessarily mean that because someone sat in a hearing and started carrying on and, you doing duck speak in a fucking room to get a clip on Twitter, that I'm necessarily going to sit there and go, you go girl. Like, Ted Cruz doesn't give a fuck about the families of people who've been bullied on the internet, because if he did, he would deal with his base. If he did, he would actually not not engage the PR firms and the troll farms and the nudges and all of those, and also not be trying to capitalize on that data that is apparently not allowed to be used by Facebook for research and not allowed to be used for product improvement and not allowed to be used by Meta, but it is allowed to be used by them to be vacuumed up and taken into a CRM that they can then use to nudge people and radicalize them and get them onto email lists that they then try to get, like you can't have it both ways. And it's the same thing when they were complaining about, conservatives being, anti-conservative bias in the algorithms. It's like, well, no, the research there shows well and truly that it is not, it doesn't have a conservative bias. It's just that the right wing media and that media ecosystem engage in more harassment. They engage in more hate speech and more harassment than people who are not in that area. And so Ted Cruz. So there was a scene in a clip that I saw where he brought up a window. Which is just a friction. Like if you watch my stuff, you'll know. Like I've talked about friction before. It's just a pop up that they've put in place, right? And let me just. We're chumping a bit, but that's okay. So we are. So that's just friction. So when what it does is it sort of interrupts. So the user's doing what they're doing. So the goal over the last since the beginning of the internet, but predominantly, especially with social media, is to sort of remove friction away, take friction away. Things that get between you and your goal, the goal has been to move, to get rid of as much of that as possible. Okay, that's been sort of the gold standard of thinking, like the ultimate frictionless experience. Okay, that's why you'll have, your thumbprint and your a lot of this stuff was sold. A lot of this convenience was sold under the guise of, friction, right? And taking friction away and removing that. But then obviously the unintended consequences of that are that, there are some things where you do need some friction in place, such as fact checking, such as, interrupting when people just automatically share without thinking about what they're actually sharing, engaging in certain behaviors. So, obviously the research shows that you can, if you insert an offer of help or some sort of intervention early in the process when someone is in a vulnerable state, that you can sort of direct them in the right place. Like there is a good reason for doing that as well. And there's a scene where and then they have that window, okay, which says this has been flagged. This content has been flagged for CSAM, like child sexual whatever, right? Okay. And it has the two options. It has get resources or show anyway. Now, they treat that like it's some sort of win or own, but it's actually not, because again, I'm with Zuck on this, which is the fact that this would have a lot more credibility and a lot more weight to it if, first of all, if they hadn't been complaining about the fact that everyone was being banned from Facebook and Meta, and so this is actually a viable alternative. Okay, a lot of it's automated. Like again, people just don't understand the scale. You can always cherry pick. You can always find an outlier example, and that is the whole MO of these fucking idiots. Okay, is to just cherry pick an outlying thing, extrapolate it to some sort of broad general pain and frustration, and they just sweep people up in that way. Okay, but they don't get, you're not thinking about the actual research. Okay, now again, is that a big fuck up on Meta's part? Yes. Okay, is that the best approach? Probably no, but you've got to look at things in context, which is that Ted Cruz specifically and all of these people have been complaining about big tech censorship and being banned and having accounts banned automatically for sharing edgy material or stuff. So what Facebook did was they put that window in there to go, okay, well, we're not going to ban it. What we'll do, we can't ban the account. We can't just insta-ban because of all of this other stuff that they're carrying on like a pork chop. So what we'll do is we can't afford to have these false positives because, obviously the algorithms are not as sophisticated as people think. They've got biases. They get it wrong, all the things we've talked about before. And so what we'll do is we'll put up this window that allows people to access help and resources or whatever, but it will provide enough of an interrupt to go, oh, this is a bad idea. This is a fucking, oh shit, maybe I should think about what I'm doing. Okay. And also, if it's wrong, show it anyway. Okay. Now, if you hit show it anyway, obviously that trains the algorithm to go, okay, well, they want that might be a false positive. That might, so it sort of trains as well. So you're training. The thing you need to understand about these things is that you're training the machine as much as the machine's training you. It's like a symbiosis. It's like a self-perpetuating thing, right? It's a reinforcing thing where you're training the algorithm as much as the algorithm's sort of there to try and train you to behave better. Okay, so in a perfect world, the hypothesis would be that we're working towards continuous improvement. Okay, now how bad actors see an algorithm is how they can fuck it, like how they can manipulate it, right? How they can create deep fakes, how they can do dark shit, how they can do horrible shit. That's why it should be a crime, okay? Because it's not the tool that they're using; it is the behavior and the conduct of the person using the tool. Like tech is a mirror for our own behavior. So if you're using tech in a way that is ethical and moves things forward and all of those sorts of things, right? And moves everyone forward and makes people better, then you're not necessarily, and you just view the world that way, you're not necessarily going to think like bad guys think, because you're not a bad guy, so it's a blind spot. So for a lot of tech people, it really is just quite a blind spot in terms of the UX. Like I hadn't really thought about it. I hadn't really thought about how, that thing that, gives you what you want and what you click on and what you interact with, obviously you do know this, that it gives more of that thing, but I just hadn't, and I'm not saying it hadn't occurred to me, because it's actually one of those things where it's a blind spot because you don't see the world that way. It's not your world, so you don't think about it. You don't think about how to manipulate things. If I had been a dodgy agency and dodgy, if I was had the mindset of a tech bro, dodgy, selfish idiot who just is thinking about how to maneuver and get around things all the time, and if I was a short-term gain person, obviously I would have seen that. Obviously, and once I became aware of it, obviously I could reverse engineer it and go, okay, well, this is obviously what's going on. But good, well-meaning, ethical people don't necessarily understand. It's not their automatic thing to go and see how the bad guys would do stuff. Bad guys are always ahead of the good guys because they'll test vulnerabilities, they'll test boundaries, they'll test all those things where most people will just operate ethically and within the rules, right? And that's that. So you're always behind the bad guys, because the bad guys. That's what it means to be a bad guy. You're manipulating things. But anyway, but that's basically what it is. It's like, well, do you want to put friction in and ban people, or do you want people to access resources? So there's solid and sound research there. Now, my concern was that the hashtag was very easily detectable. Okay. That's another thing, which was that the examples that they that were pulled out were like, I think, teen sex or something like that. Okay, but again, that is a common, if you understand sort of the porn ecosystem, most of the people who are in sort of teen sex, right, kind of porn are adults, and it's a hashtag, right? So how do you deal with the false positives there? Okay, and that is always the problem, which is how do you keep moderation going with bad guys who will just keep creating new hashtags and new ways to be found and, new language and keep going, right? It's actually far better to have people rally around a single hashtag where you can find everyone than for that to keep evolving and moving and evolving and moving. You're going to get more false positives. There's more certainty when people are sort of talking around certain things, but you've got to be on top of that. You've got to know what kind of language they're using. Now, do the feds go into the dark web and or do the feds sort of monitor these sorts of things? Of course they do. They're always monitoring the kinds of terms and like organizing words and those sorts of things around these algorithms. That's what they do. And then they let the tech companies know what's going on. And they sort of, that's an ethical, good, perfectly acceptable use of the reporting systems and the relationship between the FBI or the federal police or, whoever, and tech companies. That needs to exist. Okay. That has to exist. That relationship has to exist, because unless the tech company also have their own police, which you can't do, it becomes unworkable. Like, people, where are you actually offering solutions here? And that is my question to people like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley. They got their clip. It's all they care about. They're not going to legislate. Okay. And they're not, because the legislation that they pass and the actual core root cause issues that they are, that are the problem, are going to affect their donors. Okay. So, and they're not even in tech or whatever. They're going to affect other donors, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it means that corporations need to respect people's privacy, not harvest our data. There's all of these things that, like, not use fine print contracts. American politicians won't be legislating against that, because they've all got like massive corporate donors outside of tech that do the same thing and operate in the same way. Okay, so if they really wanted to, they would pass something like the DSA in the United States, and they would have done it. They would have done it 5 years ago. Okay, it's really actually quite interesting to me how everyone's just going, oh yeah, I knew about this all along, but it's like, fuck, where were you? I've been like, I basically fell on a fucking sword for the last few years, talking out about this stuff while everyone else was off making money, and all of a sudden, like, it affects them because of AI, or it affects them because they've been laid off, and it's like, well, I told you. I can't get the last 5 years back or the last 10 years back, but like, that's part of it. But anyway, it's by the by. But it is frustrating because everyone's just suddenly coining terms and pretending they thought of it, and it's like, well, I know you didn't think of it because you weren't there when I was there. I was sitting there saying stuff, and I was being told to shut up and told to behave, and being sidelined and not being hired, and basically effectively blackballed by an industry, because I've always said that you can't do certain things. You should be operating ethically. Okay. And that, digital agencies and tech companies, they need to be regulated and they need to sign up, and that you can't, I reached a point in 2017 where no agency who had any ethics could actually compete in a market that was unregulated, because the guys they just were willing to do whatever it took. They were selling, they were breaching privacy, they, were doing dark patterns, they don't give a fuck, and they just, they don't deliver on their promises to clients. There was no recourse, there was no right way of policing that, and, it was a race to the bottom. And so I just went, well, I can't compete against these crooks. It's like, it's like if you're a surgeon, let's say you're in the business of euthanasia, but the mafia is your main competitor, okay, and you do things the ethical right way and have to go through all of the legal hurdles and all of the things, but they can just go and, they're allowed to do whatever the fuck they want. You can't compete in that space. Okay, and that's basically how we've been operating as an industry since the beginning. And, the problem is capitalism. And the problem is that both of these political parties in the United States use that data. They spend millions of dollars a month on Facebook ads and various ways of getting around the algorithms. They use these CRMs, and they engage in unethical campaign practices. And so until I see them not doing that, then I'm not going to believe that any change is going to happen, because this is just theatrics for the election campaign. So that, and the only reason that the Atlantic are running stuff now that questions tech is not because they've had a change of heart. I mean, I've been talking about the Atlantic's role in destroying the internet for some time now, okay? And the way that they do that narrative, that sort of spinning of narratives and lumping in. I think about 2 streams ago I talked about that. But suddenly they're all like all on board with the critical AI, first of all, because they're worried about AI. And these journalists are only worried about it because it affects them. Okay, they're not worried about it. I've been worried about it because it affects others. And if anything, I would have made more money and been better off not saying anything, but I still did it because it was wrong. I question the motives of those who are suddenly on the, they were cancelling people like me 3 years ago, but now all of a sudden, they've taken pretty much every talking point that I've ever had with no apology and are now running with it. And, but the only reason that they're doing that is so that everyone's got an alibi for when like Trump versus Biden, when either of them loses, they can just blame big tech. They've just got a scapegoat for their own bollocks, right? It's got nothing to do with the fact that they care about big tech. They don't care about the users. They don't care about the families. If they did, they would have legislated already. Okay, just remember that. If they cared, they'd have legislated years ago. They don't care. And they're hiding behind the children. They're hiding behind this. Now, you got to remember also that a lot of this stuff, like I said about those funnels, right, which is that they, it might sound reasonable, okay, which is protecting children online. But the more sinister flip side of that is that how do you police that? How do you implement that? Now, I've said this before, like, yes, law should set the bar. Absolutely. Tech bros, AI, here's the bar. Here's the set of standards you need to meet. 100% agree with that. Okay, I believe in you. Build better tech. You're a builder, an innovator. Great, go for it. However, in the case of ID and in the case of particularly children, what you're effectively doing is making it so that tech companies, have to know who you are. You have to show ID. And even so, the parents have to show ID, or the children have to show ID to show that they're of a certain age. What that actually will do is have more data collected. Okay, more behavioral data particularly, because I think that you can actually extrapolate quite a lot. I think that you can probably, and that this is how they do it now, is that they can probably detect whether someone's a kid based on certain language patterns and certain conduct and, when they're on, based on location, the various other things. There's some aggregate like signal data that they already know. Some people that I reckon they already know that most are underage, like, because kids use the internet in a certain way and they use certain apps certain ways, and you can over time pretty much tell whether a child is using the app or not, right? Like, I remember actually, because my daughter was so I let her sign up to Facebook fairly young, right? Because she'd be sitting next to me. And that was when Facebook had Farmville and the Barbie games and, all that sort of stuff. And she'd be bothering me a lot during the day to kind of log on and like fuck around with my account and whatever. And I had her using my account, but then she started messaging people as me and fucking around as me and starting shit. And I was like, okay, now here's a lesson in how to use the internet. Okay, first of all. So I saw it as an opportunity. So how I navigated it with my kids was when, who are pretty savvy and like, handle this stuff pretty well now, was that basically I set them up. I gave them teaching. I showed them how to do things. I showed them how to think. I showed them how to do the privacy settings. I showed, all of that. Now, not a lot of parents have that, especially back then, not a lot of parents had that, right, ability to do that, right? They didn't even know how it worked themselves. I did. So I sat there and I go, okay, so here's how this works. Here's how you use it responsibly. Now, the threat that I used was I will be spot checking. I have your password. I will be spot checking at random times to see that you're behaving yourself, okay? That kept them on the straight and narrow. They're going to get spot checked, okay? But over time, obviously, as they get older, you sort of loosen that. This was before real parental controls and stuff really sort of went mainstream as well, before phones. So that's, with my daughter, that's how I handled it, which was she had her own Facebook account. But Facebook and Twitter, both, because I let her have an account, so she could play games and I trusted her and we had a system in place to do that. Facebook would detect that she was behaving like a child on the platform. So she would have to ask me for my ID and all that sort of stuff every so often. And so those tools, and that was what, I mean, she's 22 now, but this was easily 12 years ago So those systems have only gotten better, and those detections have only gotten more sophisticated, but they're still not perfect. Okay, and that is I think that's my frustration with a lot of these hearings, is that this tech, even though it's very sophisticated, it's not even close to perfect. And this is something where AI hype and all of that sort of stuff really feeds into it, because people are not talking about false positives and the downsides and the flaws in these things. And, you're seeing this now as AI sort of bleeds into every product, right? You've seen that this week with the female politician in Australia who someone had used Adobe Photoshop. Photoshop now has a feature called generative fill, where you can select parts of the image, put in a prompt, and it will generate like whatever, right? Now, that made her breasts larger, gave her a midriff, and she basically went, what the fuck, why have you photoshopped me with bigger boobs? And, you know, there was a whole thing. But if you know how it works, you know that first of all, it's still in beta. Second of all, right, a lot of it is based on giving you what it thinks you want, okay? So if you're, it's not necessarily, and again, they just displace the blame onto tech. Adobe gets the blame when Adobe really they've done as much as they can to make it pretty clear that, you know, these things are in beta, they're not perfect, that, you know, there is a user responsibility there, okay? And the thing about this Firefly is that it is actually operating as designed. Like when I said before about how you train the AI as much as it trains you and back and forth, right? It's an exchange. It is actually an exchange. And so if somebody is doing production work, okay, at, say, Channel 9, like a TV station, okay, the vast majority of their work would be photoshopping like women to look thinner, bigger breasted, all of that sort of stuff. So you've got that trailing data, okay. But also you've got to know how these AI things are trained, okay. So the AI one, the Adobe one is trained on the Adobe stock library, okay. Now, I know this is something that has been a known problem for years with stock, which is that when you want to search certain ordinary, let's say you want to find someone like me in a stock photo, okay? You need to like look up. So if you want a 45-year-old woman, you need to look up 55-year-old. If you want to, because everything is biased towards sort of magazine, pristine, hipsters, young people, attractive people, all of that sort of stuff. So that is that bias in the algorithm. But it is also the fact that photographers will put those things because people want attractive models. It's like it's a constant spiral. So you've got a media system where everyone wants so the demand is there. Okay, so everyone buys the magazines. Okay. They want the pretty people on the magazines. Now, do the magazines force it on us or do we demand it? I mean, that's both are true, okay? But then you've got, so that means that there's a market for photography, for beautiful people, and the stock photos and all those sorts of things are geared towards that audience, okay, and that market. This is how tech is really a mirror for a broader problem in society, which is attitudes. You can't regulate these things in tech without clamping down on diversity of thought and diversity of opinion and the complexity of humans. Okay, that's my overall point here, which is that you can't just sit there and pretend that there aren't people who are interested in CSAM material, right? Or that kind of stuff, inappropriate content. It just exists. Okay. You can't keep working in and that is the sort of the right-wing approach, is to just scream about it, have a moral panic about it, judge everyone, do nothing. Absolutely. Just ignore the science, ignore all of the studies, all of the evidence that says that harm minimization and behavioral help and material support and economics and all those other things, those root causes, those are the solutions and the cure, not your histrionic panic attack, racist, fucking, witch hunting bullshit that you're engaging in. That doesn't work, okay? Not only is it stupid and unproductive and pathetic and mean and wrong, it also doesn't work. And that is that we need to fix root problems in society, which come down to economics, patriarchy, racism, colonization, those sorts of things, okay? Capitalism. That's the conversation. If you're not willing to have that conversation, then you're not a good faith actor, because those are the causes. Every fucking study, other than the handful of cherry-picked studies that these guys run with, shows that, enforcement doesn't work. But they're the ones that are complaining the second that you start to put like actual enforcement in, and it affects them and their base. So if their base is getting banned for like Nazi, like stuff and false positives and harassing people and bullying, then they're not allowed to, then big tech's to blame. If big tech puts in something where people aren't banned but access resources, then big tech are to blame. Do you understand? Do you see how, like, this is a complete sideshow and a complete distraction from all of the issues? Again, the issues that I acknowledge, but we need to follow a process. And then, you know, like, again, I have problems with Facebook, but problems with Meta or Twitter or Snapchat or Discord are no different to the problems of big tobacco, of Juul, of big oil, of all of the fossil fuel industry, of the media, the corporate media, fucking, you know, anything. It's capitalism, dickhead. And if you're not prepared to fucking say that, then you're not really operating in good faith. You're just trying to get re-elected and appeal to your base because they feel aggrieved because they can't sit there and purposely misgender trans people all day on the internet. Okay. And that, you know, like that they can't engage in their harassment campaigns. Okay. And that's the thing. They're not, that's part of the reason why I fall on the side of tech on this instance, or in this instance with the hearing, outside of the spectacle of the clips. That is a surface level analysis. It is shallow. And, you know, part of the reason why I'm wholly skeptical. Anybody who is aligned with any political sort of, most of these think tanks and not-for-profits and PACs and researchers and all of these people who are in the mainstream as critics of tech, they're either, the main agendas that I've seen are to suppress dissent, okay, so launder your data through something like the CCDH, where you operate with something that it has a grain of truth to it, but then lump in a whole bunch of other things that just happen to not agree with your worldview, such as, you know, the CCDH have been like have been linked to the attacks on Corbyn, okay, during the Labor, anyway, moving on. But, you know, to sort of launder certain data and ideas and research, which are brochures and not research. There's no peer review that goes into these things. And if you look at the data, there's nothing there, okay? They're just laundering stuff and making claims and writing a blog post, and then that launders up through Media Matters and all these other not-for-profits to make things true when they're not true. And that is not how you should be making the rules. And, you know, but Zuck's got a point there, which is that, yes, there is some evidence with internal studies that certain groups of girls, like if you actually go back and watch the clip again with Ted Cruz, where he brings up the stats, but look at the way that it's framed, the way the questionnaire is framed, which is that 13 to 15-year-olds have been exposed to nudity. Yes, of course. But what's the nudity? What kind of nudity is it? Is it, again, it's like, well, for you to be horrified by that, there's a whole bunch of other stuff and a whole bunch of follow-up questions that need to be addressed, which is that children 13 to 17, they're going to look at porn. They're going to be curious about sex. They're going to look at those things. So, of course, they're going to do that. What nudity are you talking about? Define it. What does it mean? Is it their friends? Is it their friends, like, doing selfies in, like, whatever, okay? Is it because they're sexting with other 14-year-olds? Okay. You can't just lump in, like, this hysterical conservative worldview that, again, it's just that same hysteria where they don't live in the real world. They don't understand that 14, 15-year-olds are curious and engage in these sorts of things, and that making sure that they do it safely. It's the same shit as teen pregnancy. You know, the solution is not to scare the kid or not give them education. The solution is to give them the tools they need to do it safely, because they're going to do that. All of the research backs me up there. Okay, now, will there be a subset of teenagers that have a problem, okay, with eating disorders, right? But they did with magazines, okay? Anorexia and bulimia were still a thing, okay, in our generation before social media, okay? So there's always going to be those people that have those issues, and those issues are usually attached to something else, okay? Some of it's like temperamental, some of it is mental illness, like pre-existing, okay? Again, it's chicken and the egg stuff. People with pre-existing mental illness are more drawn to social media because of the avoiding behaviors and all those things that, you know, so they're going to be, it's going to be a skewed sample to begin with. The vague loading of the questions, being exposed to nudity. What does that mean? Who's nude? What kind of nudity is it? Is it extreme? Is it harmless? Those questions, you know, Instagram makes you feel bad. Yeah. Okay. Well, what does that mean? What, you know, like when you actually drill down into the details of that research, it's a lot less clear. Okay. And what specifically is causing it? Now, a lot of it is that, like I said, people with a mental illness or autism, ADHD, various other things like that will use more social media than, you know, neurotypical, you know, normal, healthy kids, right? So there's already that skewed sample, but they'll also be have a predisposition to things like addiction. So all of the things that predispose you to gambling addiction, drinking, heroin, you know, all of those other sort of substance abuse problems. There's an overlap with that and problematic social media use or internet gaming disorder. It's basically just another. People can get addicted to anything is basically, and so there's always going to be that 7 to 10% of people who can't moderate with certain things. Okay. I can't do it with alcohol. You know, like some people, you know, some would argue I can't do it with tech either, but I'm just, you know, I'm saying like you either have that profile or you don't. And so to turn around and then, you know, the theatrics around this apology, and it's like, well, do I think that they've been asleep at the wheel on it? Yes. Do I think that the profit motive is to blame? Yes. Do I blame Zuck? No. Like forcing, it's like, well, do I blame him? No, because he's got an impossible job, and anybody who is in his role, you don't want his role. You don't want that. You think you do, and you think you do it better, but you don't. Okay. These are tough things. There are no easy answers, and every answer that you think you've got, there are unintended consequences. Like I said, moaning about fucking being banned and all the false positives. So you put up a thing where they're not banned and they can access resources, and you know, you try to, you know, do at least some sort of data informed, you know, empirically like based research around what you understand to work and not work. But at the same time, they go, okay, well, they're going to fucking come after us for banning conservatives for like everything. And they're going to come after us for all of this. All right. So what we'll do is we'll put friction in instead. So, all right. So the friction. All right. But the scale of that is so huge that we need to automate it. There's going to be false positives. Okay. And then those bastards are going to come and cherry pick it and drag every false positive into a hearing and not actually be reasonable. They're just trying to sit there and get their gotcha. Okay, that's all that is. It's just getting their gotcha. You can find anything. It's like with the, I've talked about this data thing before. It's like everyone's got secrets. Everyone's got one thing that they've done that, you know, if it were to be made public, they wouldn't, you know, that it could be framed in a way that, you know, makes them look like a terrible person. Okay, cherry picking is not how you win an argument. You look at the 99% of things. You don't look at the fucking 1% of things that are, you know, inevitable and normal. And that's why this thing is so bad faith, is because they have cherry picked research that is favorable to their worldview, generalized to the point, and, you know, use thought terminating sort of heavily loaded surveys and questions that, you know, most people who are in this space would go, okay, yeah, I got some follow-up questions there. You know, and again, it's just that whole, like, don't trust this shit. It's not, harm minimization is the only way forward, and access to social workers, access to services, but they're not going to ever do that. Okay. And that is why it's not worth talking about. And it's the same thing. Like, and that's why, you know, you can be a critic of tech, and, you know, for all its flaws, because tech is a mirror for, you know, ourselves. Ultimately, it's a mirror of humanity. But the people who are designing those things and have, you know, a responsibility for making sure that that mirror isn't too ugly. Okay. You know, those people need to be regulated and have ethics. It's like I was saying, like, that's why it might seem like I have an inconsistent position on things, but I don't. I'm actually completely consistent, which is that because I'm quite happy to acknowledge when tech is to blame and when tech's not to blame. And, you know, for the most part, a lot of these biases and, you know, tech didn't ruin politics. Politics ruined tech. Let me put it that way. Okay. The second these greedy fuckers decided that they could access everyone's data, again, I know this because I pitched a product very similar naively to politicians here about how they can sort of get a sense of how the electorate feels in real time on any given issue, right? I know about this stuff. I just thought it would be used. I didn't even think that it wouldn't be used for evil because I'm not that kind of person. These fuckers are, right? Selfish assholes. No one thought that they, you know, bad guys would be training this stuff, right? No one thought that you know, again, it's just a dispositional thing. And it's the same thing with like an entrepreneur, right? Most people, when you're running a startup, and it's the same thing with Zuck. Like, I think that's probably why I defend him a bit more than most people would, which is that it can't be an easy position to be in, which I've talked about this before, which is, you know, you started out idealistic and then you end up, it's a bait and switch for him as much as anybody else, right? He thought that he would, and he keeps sort of doubling down and thinking that he's helping humanity. And then, you know, then it's sort of more palliative and, you know, it's like you kind of resign yourself. But then, you know, Facebook reaches a point where he's literally the things, it's either him as CEO or some other fucking Sheryl Sandberg, some evil fuck. And it's like, well, does he stay and hold the line or does he sort of quit? And, you know, they're not easy decisions, right? And they're not easy conversations, especially when you subjected to this clown car of fucking idiots who are only trying to get their moment in, you know, on the news, forcing him to apologize. And it's like, well, okay, but that's not what the research says. And like it's going through the courts. Like I trust that there's all these lawsuits that are coming, and I'd be interested to see some of the evidence. But people are really, again, this is just people being dumb. Again, a lot of it is because they're dumb, but you know, sort of acting like a cheer squad for yes, we got him. And it's like, well, that's not quite how it works. You still need evidence. You still need actual proof, and you still need to be precise about what you're actually claiming. And, you know, there does need to be some rigor to this. You can't just say, well, I feel it, and therefore it's true. And it might be frustrating. It is frustrating. I've sat here for 10 years going, you know, this is a bad idea. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this. But I still want there to be evidence of harm. I still want the root cause to be addressed, which more and more is showing that it's just kids that were already vulnerable and already struggling are drawn to social media, not the other way around, okay? And that it is largely economic and socioeconomic and various other things, right? If you create social programs and give people support, they're less, and they've got something to do, and you give them some purpose and meaning, then they will be less inclined to do this stuff. It's not fucking hard. Okay. But again, don't get into this sort of moral panic witch trial bullshit. It winds me up. It winds me up something chronic watching people just get in this bandwagon. And then you've obviously got the US Democrats, which, you know, they're just looking for a scapegoat, right, for when they inevitably lose. But they're using it behind the scenes. They're using it to silence people. It's all about control for them, right? It's all about controlling what's on social media, not fucking actually addressing the root cause. And I think that's sort of where we are, which is that, you know, I can't like they're my enemy. I'm not going to sit there and cheer them on. I'd like them to regulate like grown-ups, and I'd like them to actually do you know, the real work of reforming all sorts of systems so that these things don't happen. But it's not going to happen. It's all just fucking spectacle and a clown show. But I will also defend AI when I need to, which is that for the most part, AI is a parrot. It is a mirror of society, okay? And the people who are building tech on top of it, it mirrors their worldview. And that's why tech bros can go fuck themselves, because they shouldn't be in charge of things like that, because they can do real harm. And that's why, you know, people who do safety work, they need to be very, very aware of their own biases. And they're not. They're very much not. Anyway, I'm coming up to an hour and I'm not feeling it much today, but I thought I'd better stream. That was just a quick little rant. But yeah, I don't know what people want me to say about this stuff because I'm not going to sit and explain it. I don't know. I don't know what the fuck to say about any of this stuff anymore. I don't know whether I should even bother talking about it as much as I want to. I don't know whether it's worthwhile because now you've just got people who've just taken up and they go, oh yeah, okay, well, that's mine now. Even though I haven't done anything or said anything, I'm just suddenly here now. I'm a critic of AI because it's convenient for me. I'm a critic of big tech because it became trendy to do so, not because it actually was the wrong thing to do in like all along. You know, I've said this about like the social dilemma and the Tristan. Everyone's just, nothing winds me up more than people sharing my own fucking work back to me that I was doing 10 years before everyone else. And then suddenly everyone's sharing stuff with me that I wasn't, you know, I didn't have the resources to write about, or I'm not a journalist, so I'm not on the record, but sitting there and it's like, oh, wow, really? Did you look stuff up? Did you? Cool. It's like, well, you could have, where were you 10 years ago? Pisses me off. But anyway, doesn't matter. I'll just get ignored and all that stuff. So anyway, don't matter. I'm in a mood. Anyway, I gotta go do some real work. And I will talk soon. And yeah, I'll be back when I'm in a better mood. I don't know, I'm not feeling it. Anyway, have a good one. Bye.